Welcome to the intersection of city politics and everyday life. I'm Brian Lehrer. This past Sunday, Linda Brown, the Kansas schoolgirl at the center of the 1954 Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education, passed away at age 76. Her landmark case rejected segregation in American schools. But of course, laws alone have not integrated most schools or made them equal. Take New York City. For a host of reasons, our 1,799 schools remain among the most segregated in the nation. This certainly includes the 8 highly competitive specialized high schools: Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, Brooklyn Tech, Brooklyn Latin, Staten Island Tech, Queens High School for the Sciences, the High School of American Studies, and the High School of Math, Science, and Engineering, 8 of 8. Very few of the best and brightest minority children gain entry into these elite schools, where one single test determines admission. The racial statistics are disturbing. Stuyvesant offered entry to 926 students last year. Just 13 offers went to blacks, 28 to Latino students. This in a city where 2/3 of the 1.1 million school kids are black or Hispanic. Whites and Asians fill 4 out of 5 slots in the special schools. Now, our guests today insist the city can do better. Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. is calling on Mayor de Blasio to change the admissions criteria for the 5 special schools that his honor has the most control over, 5 of the 8. Manhattan City Councilman Keith Powers from the East Side says reserve half the seats in all the elite schools for the top middle schoolers in every borough. Lazar Treschan has researched the issue for the anti-poverty group, the Community Service Society, and recommends relying on a broader array of existing school tests to add diversity. And Jacqueline Wayans says we have to help kids with learning and test taking years before 8th grade. She has visited 350 schools as co-author of New York City's Best Schools, A Parent's Guide. She's now with the group Lantern Community Services. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So let's refresh our viewers' memory. Jack, I'll start with you. Why do we have the specialized high schools in the first place? They have a purpose. What is the purpose?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, and even using my own story, you know, as a mom living in the Bronx, I was in the lowest economic quadrant, and I couldn't afford private school. I couldn't afford to move, and the schools in my community at that time, 15 years ago, were performing poorly, and there was also a danger factor. And so I did what most parents who don't have options do, and I went home and I cried about it until I found out through Clara Hemphill's book, New York City's Best Public Elementary Schools, that there were schools that I could have my daughter test into, right? And so tests within themselves are not a bad thing, but it's just making sure that those are allowing for seats and allowing for room so that they can have the option to be at the table.
Anybody else want to talk about the basic idea of why we even have these, or debate whether we should even have them, Councilman?
Well, there has been a discussion about whether they should continue to exist or not, and there was actually, I was just referencing earlier, an op-ed that a Stuyvesant alum wrote, which is to say this entire admissions process or this conversation could be eliminated by just strengthening the regular high schools we have and eliminating limiting schools. I'm not sure, to be honest, where I come out on that part. I think there is a benefit, as Jacqueline noted, that to having the specialized high schools and having a competitive environment for students that want it, or perhaps can't get into private schools, or can't afford private schools. But there certainly has been debate about the mere existence of them, and but I think for my purposes, it's really making sure that if they exist, that they're serving their function.
In the academic world, you always have this debate as to whether or not we want to carve out a section for kids or students who are accelerated in their learning. And I believe that there should be a place in the educational system where we challenge all of our kids, whether they're creative and artistic, whether they have special needs, or whether they're accelerated in their learning. And you can do that not only through specialized high schools, but even earlier grades with gifted and talented classes. I was a student in gifted and talented, And for me, if I didn't have those challenges, I would say that maybe I would have been a little bit more bored and perhaps had too much time in my hand to get in trouble. The question becomes, are we giving the majority of the kids the right opportunity, an equal opportunity to be able to benefit from these types of courses? And unfortunately, when you look at these latest results from the city of New York, the city still has a long way to go for them to claim that they have some type of parity when it comes to accelerated education.
And we're going to get into each of your proposed solutions to the problem, but Lazar, do you want to join this part of the conversation?
Well, yeah, let's not forget the origin story of how we got to where we are now. The specialized high schools in particular have an admissions test on their own, which was created by a law in the late 1970s that was directly as a result of what was referred to as white flight. Let's create a test to ensure that, for the most part, that white parents and upper middle class parents would still be able to send their kids to public high schools in New York. So, the real origin story is a story of white supremacy behind these schools. Now, I think a lot of things have changed since then, and I do agree that the number one asset we have of our young people in New York City is their diversity. So we want diverse high schools, and some of those will be different in terms of academic skills, in terms of interests, like the borough president said. It's just really how are we allocating seats to those options. And the way we see it, that legacy of white supremacy that created the admissions test in the 1970s is alive and well today.
Is there any way to have, in your opinion, a gifted and talented school of any kind that, until we've solved poverty and the underlying causes of racial inequality, would not, in your view, amount to a white supremacy system?
So it's a good question, because we can't just say, well, all the schools need to be great schools, and that's because we have to deal with the current realities. So given that we do have these institutions that could be ways to reduce inequality in our city, we need to look at the extent that right now they're doing the opposite. Right now they're perpetuators of inequality. So how can we turn them on their head to reduce inequality? And what we just have to use is evidence and research, because right now a lot of education policy is based when it's handy to white supremacy on theory, and when it's not, and otherwise, only evidence comes in when it's useful to those with power. There is real research and evidence that shows the best way to predict future performance is performance in context. It's class rank. And that's why some of the proposals that I think are most promising, like the one that we're putting forward, is really how do we use class rank and context to promote opportunity to those schools.
Let's go around. Did you want to get a reaction to that? You can if you want.
No.
All right, so I want to go around the table and hear a little bit of each of your ideas for fixing the admissions process to the specialized high schools as they exist. And Jackie, I think you emphasizing just starting way earlier to prepare kids for excellence, yes?
Well, starting early is important because a lot of the neighborhood schools, the local schools, are being judged on their performance. And so it's not just high risk for the student, it's high risk for those teachers, it's high risk for the schools. And so they're just doing the minimum of test taking. And what I've seen in my experience of visiting schools is that the skill sets aren't necessarily different. It's the exposure that the students have had in their life, whether they've gone on vacation with their parents or to museums. And when you talk about what's available to students in low-income communities, a lot have been stripped away, right? They've lost music, they've lost art, they've lost enrichments, they've lost the ability to do deep dives and deep study. These are things that make you beyond a test taker, but someone who's really well adjusted to learning and have an excitement about learning. And so that student can then go and take a test, but they can also decide to go in other directions as well.
So I think that if we go back to the George W. Bush, Ted Kennedy, No Child Left Behind law, it kind of had this as its underpinning. And Mayor Bloomberg, during his terms, bought way into this, right? Start really early, have the high-stakes standardized tests. And I know you're saying they wound up pressuring music and art and other kinds of things out. But the point was to prepare kids from the beginning. And if you really see how they're doing with a real standardized test in 3rd grade, then you're going to correct them a little to 4th grade, a little, and by the time they get to 8th grade and these high stakes high school admissions exams, then we're going to be much more even than we were before that whole system started. Did it work?
I have to talk about the rocking chairs and the rugs and the smart boards, because it was done in an attempt to level the playing ground, but the playing ground can't be leveled when Bronx schools are struggling to get PTAs to pay $5 a year, and other schools are getting parents to pay $5,000 a year, and therefore they can pay for Kaplan to come in and do the special tutoring for their kids. They can pay for the instruments and all those things. So the socioeconomic piece is extremely important.
So we know that many of the students in years past who were able to benefit from specialized high schools came right out of the gifted and talented schools and classes. But we saw many of them been done away with over the years. One of the things that we can do is that we can have mandatory test taking at the very early grades, so that the children who can benefit from gifted and talented can be accepted. And we don't have to rely on whether or not the schools, the individual schools or educators are going to get this information out to the parents. You do mandatory testing, increase the amount of gifted and talented classes. You can also do more than just the test. I know that folks, when they read the report that I put out last year, they say, well, Borough President Diaz wants to do away with the test. No, we don't. But what we're saying is that when you look at Ivy League universities, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, they don't base their admissions solely on the test. And so there are other things that you can do, and we can do almost immediately. The city can do this with the 5 schools that are not under the auspices of the Heck-Calandra law, which mandates this mandatory admissions test.
Let's take a pause on that for just a second and explain a little bit of the system and the politics. Viewers, you've heard Bronx Science, Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech. Those are the legacy schools, the big 3 specialized high schools. They're controlled by a particular state law that mandates that only this one standardized test that they give in 8th grade would be the admissions criteria. You're saying these 5 other schools
were created by the Department of Education. And so we would hope that the Department of Education can create even more, so that we can have more access. They need to continue to expand their Dream After School program, which allows for free preparation for this test. But they should also look at other things, portfolio. That we can do it in a way where the 5%, the top 5% of middle school graduates get an automatic admission to these specialized high schools. There are a number of things that we can do here. If we don't, Brian, then what are we doing? Are we really going to accept this premise that Black and Latino students just aren't as smart as their Asian and white counterparts? I refuse to accept that.
Right, obviously not. And you've been, before you joined the City Council just this year, I know you worked with the State Senator Liz Krueger, right, among others. Yeah. And since Albany does control a lot of this, what would be the resistance to what the borough president was just laying out? Treat it like the Ivy League schools. Well, we know the Ivy League schools, they don't just admit people on the basis of the SAT test. Right. They look at your grades, they look at your extracurricular activities, you get to write an essay that they can assess, you get recommendations, and they don't wind up with a dumbed-down Ivy League, Princeton, Columbia, Harvard population. It works to get the best and the brightest. Why can't we do that? Why wouldn't the state legislature, if you think they wouldn't, say yes to that? I
think a couple things. I just want to note that I think that on the prior question, that anything around let's fix the problem earlier is just to me, is just an exit strategy from dealing with the problem right now. And is that, in fact, typically the answer when you don't want to take the issue on is to say let's deal with it in other parts of the system. I think there is resistance, and in fact, this law was put in place. It was noted when there was a conversation around diversity decades ago. So I think there's continued resistance, and obviously the makeup and the nature of Albany as it is right now, being tripartisan and being, somewhat upstate control versus downstate control in different chambers, I think leads to differences in opinion about how the test or how on merit versus what it was considered merit. So I think there's resistance to it, but I would note, as the borough president made a point of, there should be an ongoing effort both in Albany from the city of New York, and there should be an ongoing effort in looking at its own schools to see how we can do better on that. And the proposal I put out was to actually look at the state law and say, is there some flexibility afforded to us under the state law to do admissions bit different, to still use the test, but to change the allocation. Right. I think there's a somewhat of a flexibility there, but either way would preserve some of the merits of the test.
So yours is like what they do to get people into the University of Texas, right?
Correct.
After the Supreme Court threw out affirmative action
Right.
in the way that Texas was practicing it,
Right.
they said, okay, we have racial segregation in housing. Kids go to school separately in high school, so let's just take the top 10% of each high school, and that's going to be racially diverse because neighborhoods are racially diverse. High schools are not racially diverse. They're segregated. Therefore, if you just take the top 10% of each middle school for the New York City analogy and put the top 5%, 10%, whatever the right percentage would be to fill up these specialized high schools, then it would be diverse, but it would still be the brightest from each neighborhood. Do you like that idea?
So the proposal we have is actually even just as a first step, what if you did the top 3%? So really you're just talking about in middle schools, the valedictorian, the salutatorian, and in some cases a third student from the entire middle school. Because right now there are deserts in the Bronx, in central Brooklyn, where not just no school, but there are no students from a district. And what we're saying is use performance in context. So take those students, just doing the top 3%, even if you did a citywide bar as well of being one standard deviation above the mean, meaning so in the top 15, 16% citywide, you would double the number of Blacks and Latino students. And you would actually have students with higher proficiency entering the specialized high schools, because the dirty secret is, since this test is not standardized that they use, the specialized high schools admissions test, it's not standardized.
What do you mean it's not standardized?
It is
Everybody
not,
takes the same
It
test.
is not based off of the state standards. Not everybody takes this test. This is not this. We have all this testing already happening in our schools. Many of us are for or against it. We're not even using those tests. This is a separate test. I mean, there is so much about public education.
That's a great point. So everybody is required to take these third grade through 8th grade standardized tests in language arts and in math. This is a different
We should use
test.
those results then.
That's what you're proposing,
Right. And so
right?
what we're saying is, look, we would even
The
prefer
best
to
8th
move
grade
to a broader thing, but
performers.
even if you were, in our proposal is just use these 7th grade exams, because by the time you're applying in 8th grade, it's too late to use the 8th grade exam. So it's really the 7th grade exams that everybody's using for high school entry.
Right.
So just use those, because not only is everyone required to take it,
Right.
schools are evaluated on that. So every school across the city is pushing resources for those
And
tests.
you say that would make standards at the specialized schools go up? How come?
Because many people who with not great scores on those 7th grade exams, particularly in ELA, are getting in through the specialized high schools admissions test. Partly it's due to the scoring. As the New York Times and others have pointed out, you can get a 49% on one section, but if you get a 99% on another section, because the way it's scored, you will get in, versus if you get a 90 percentile on both, you won't get in. It's really, again, it's really benefiting those who can do test prep. And the test prep situation is ridiculous.
Jackie?
It's just one really quick thing there why it's also a good idea to take the top 3% or even the 10% is that a lot of students are deselecting themselves by the time they're in 7th grade, because they're looking and they don't see themselves represented.
that
And
school.
so they think, I'm not even going to bother because I'm not going to get in. So there's some deselection that's happening. So this would kind of level the playing field a little bit to say, at least we can see an incremental increase across the board.
And then we're not even touching on the socioeconomic aspects of all of this. How many parents are not able to afford this preparation?
Right.
How many of them can't get their kids,
Right.
even if they were prepared, the day of, maybe they have siblings that were
Right.
sick, maybe something occurred, maybe one of the children in the Bronx has an asthma attack and couldn't take the exam, couldn't go and travel to take the exam on that
but
Saturday.
that's been the de Blasio approach, hasn't it? To try to get test prep to more kids citywide for these standardized, specialized high school tests,
and
right?
we commend those
Hasn't it?
efforts, but we need them, to do more.
We do not commend
don't.
those efforts. There's no way supply-side approaches can compete
Supply
with,
side?
So there's a supply and a demand for these students. The demand is how they're chosen. The supply side is how they're prepared, the supply of students into the marketplace for these schools. Supply side systems, look at the Soviet Union, can never compete with a demand-driven world. Test prep, putting a few $100,000 into test prep cannot compete with gentrification on a citywide level, cannot compete with these massive pressures that are the economic pressures that are happening across the city. Test prep is not the answer, and at this point, it's fiscally irresponsible for the mayor to continue to do this when he knows the results are actually going in the opposite direction.
I was
But
trying to be a
your
little more diplomatic since we've gone there. I mean, think about it. Some of these kids, when you look at the New York City Housing Authority and the conditions that they live in, you have the city now speaking of building new jails all over the city of New York, and yet the schools around where these jails are going to be built are not equipped. They don't have the science labs. They don't have the technology. And so, again, while we can continue, and we should continue to invest on preparing, the fact is that there's so much lacking that other communities have in communities like the Bronx and parts of Brooklyn.
Are you against closing Rikers, by the way?
I am not against closing Rikers. We can talk about that, but I think that before you speak of building new jails, for instance, the city
on
proposed,
testing?
they proposed a site in the Bronx. Without our input, the process is already flawed. However, if you wanted to go on that site, Samuel Gompers High School is less than 2 blocks away. You should look at the conditions. You have about a quarter of a mile away, you have Patterson houses who have been waiting for new boilers that have been financed and funded for the last 7 years, and people are still freezing at night. So before we do a new jail, we should address those issues.
And to go back to your original point, there is something that you were starting to say the mayor could do with a stroke of a pen tomorrow, in your opinion, right?
Yeah, so going back to Keith's, the council member's point, obviously we want to continue to lobby the state legislature so that they can amend the law, the Head Calandra law. But there's something, and that only affects 3 of the 8 schools that you referred to. 5 of those schools were schools that were done by the city of New York, and so without needing to adjust the state legislation, you can just automatically do some of the recommendations that you heard here, and the recommendations that others have, so that we can have more access. But to keep these numbers the way they are is unacceptable.
I did ask the mayor that question recently, and he said his lawyers aren't so sure that he's actually got that authority.
I think he does, but I would note that I think one of the kind of common grounds, I think, amongst the 4 of us is obviously a passion and a commitment to trying to do better. But second, that it may not just be the one item. It may not just be changing the test or changing the mission standard. Certainly, I do think that more test prep and more resources, in addition to all of that, can be helpful. But I think that limits how much we're really going to see in terms of diversity. So my point being, changing housing patterns and gentrification certainly is part of this conversation. Intergenerational poverty is certainly part of this conversation. School zones generally is part of this conversation. It's a big picture thing. The proposal I put out was really to answer your question, which is that I don't think the state's going to change it tomorrow or anytime soon, the test. So do we look at looking at the 5 schools, or do we look at ways that we can try to find flexibility within it? I think, and perhaps adding more opportunities, I think is all part of preventing this from going on further in light of the state's inaction.
Do your own constituents want to do something like that? You represent a pretty affluent district from about Stuyvesant Town to 98th Street on the east side, right?
Yeah. I've heard mixed opinions, to be honest. I did the op-ed, and I heard from some who are constituents that went to the specialized high schools who thought at least going somewhere where you're changing the allocation but not totally reforming the test had a lot of merit. Certainly, I've heard some that think that the test should be preserved. I think it's mixed, but I do think there's an appreciation for putting out ideas on how to address the problem, and I think there's a recognition that the numbers that are in the diversity we're failing. We have a failing grade in terms of diversity in specialized high schools.
Is there anything to be learned? This might be, a real hot button, but from the fact that it's the Asian immigrants' kids who are passing everybody to get into these high schools. And we're talking about, for the most part, families of relatively modest means with a lot of English language learners, even, Lazar.
So, that's talked about a lot, and it's important to talk about in depth because, again, the Asian community is not monolithic. There's a lot of diversity, and it is subgroups of the Asian community. We're not really talking about poor Bangladeshi students that are flooding these schools, right? It is subgroups, and one of the issues with white supremacy is it does force groups of color to compete over crumbs, and that's sort of a situation we have happening here. The Times did a great story a while ago around what some of these test prep programs look like. And this is why I'm against test prep. That's not education. You should look at these programs. These kids are going 9 to 5 for the entire summer, a lot in Chinese American communities, where they are not even studying math and ELA. They're starting with the test on day one and just studying how to game the test. I don't think that's education for them either. And there's a great article on Vox.com today about how so often Asian American students are used to fight affirmative action on behalf of whites. And that is, I believe, a lot of what's happening here, but there's also a lot of diversity within the Asian community where there are a lot of subgroups there being ignored.
And in elite schools and, among white parents whose kids are competing to get into elite schools, whether at the high school level or college level, they're starting to want affirmative action for whites because they say it's getting too Asian, Jack.
I found that all Black and Latino families that I've worked with, whether low income or super savvy, they all care about education, but it's on what level? It can be on the level of this is free education, take it to the limit, to this is free education, go to the Ivy League school, right? And so those options within vary by community and by household. So it's a very nuanced question, like you said. I don't believe it's something that you can just pigeonhole.
You work, and we just have like a minute left, but you work for an anti-poverty group per se. In order to equalize the proportions of people going to the best high schools, is all this talk about schools and tests and everything kind of missing the point, and what we really have to do is fight poverty? Otherwise, we're going to be whistling around the edges the whole time?
Absolutely. The number one we can do are issues to really raise the incomes and sustainability of families. In the meantime, let's take these elite institutions we have and use them to do the same thing. Let's rejigger them. They were created based on white supremacy. Let's flip them on their head and use them as ways to make our society a little bit more equal.
Guess what? We haven't solved it today, but maybe we've come a little bit closer. Thank you all for a really great conversation and for coming to our table. And that's our program for today. We are here each week at this hour at the intersection of city politics and everyday life. And find me on the radio as well, weekdays from 10 to noon on WNYC. That's 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, Zephyr Teachout, treasurer for the Cynthia Nixon campaign for governor. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.